allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I call to order this regular session of the Vienna City Council. Having taken roll and having a quorum, we will proceed. Let the record reflect that Recorder Smith is attending by phone and Councilman Leach is absent. The first item that we have on the agenda is the public forum. We have one individual signed up, none other than the one and only Henry Sasson.
The legend.
Known for his humility.
That's right. That's right. You got that right. Okay. Henry Sasson, 1307 Greenmont Hills Drive here in Vienna. I got two topics today. They're real quick. Number one is anybody got any update on that house that's foundation's built in Greenmont and nothing's ever happened since? I mean, we got to have some progress. Apart from it still stands there, no progress has been made since the neighbors came and complained last year about it.
I don't have anything to update on it. I thought, it was my understanding they resolved the drainage standing water issue.
Still, it's an eyesore. I mean, it's a house that's not done. As a city, we should do something. So that's number one. Number two is, you guys may have seen in a paper or heard, the town of North Hills, their pool, they're looking to see what they can do to save it. They have a large summer swim league team. And hopefully, as a city, we can offer some assistance for that team, I should say, for like possibly time in the mornings to have practice. Usually swim practices early in each morning. So Chad, if we can have you or others reach out to them and see if we can help them out. They may not have a swim season this year if they don't have a pool to practice in.
I did get a call, and I got the message the next day the gentleman was going out of town or leaving the country. We are very open to, if the pool is not available, that we would work a schedule and provide them an opportunity to be able to do that.
And usually this summer they have what they call it, swim meets. They usually happen like from 6 o'clock in the evening until dark. So you get a bunch of teams from all over the county and from Ohio and so forth that come to participate, and it usually turns out to a big crowd. So they typically host, I think, 4 meets per summer at their site. So something to think about. And if you want, I can reach out to the folks there too.
And you can just extend to them, if their pool doesn't open, any way that we can support them.
Okay.
Short of our regular open hours, I'm more than willing to work with them and allow them access.
Okay, because swim, like practices are always early in the morning,
Yeah.
and then the meets are like from 6 o'clock in the evening until dark.
Yeah.
Okay.
They won't get any fuss from me.
Okay.
The minutes from the March 26 meeting have been printed, posted, and circulated. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? None? Let the minutes stand submitted as submitted. Do we have a treasurer's report this evening?
Yep. I reviewed the reconciliations of funds dated April 2nd, 2026 in the short budget report at a high level and compared them to the previous months. The accounts are in order and the city is financially sound to pay its bills.
Are there any questions for the treasurer?
I got one comment though. Any update or comments or concerns after the budget was submitted to the state?
None.
Okay, because I was out. When you guys had that meeting, I was at the headquarters up in New York.
No, we had one revision, and that was to increase the one charitable donation from Councilman Leach that he brought forward. Other than that, it got submitted the next day without any issues.
Okay.
Any other questions? Let the report stand as submitted. We have no unfinished business. Moving then on to new business. The first item on the agenda is the first reading of an ordinance proposing a construction and water improvement projects of cities' waters, and we're proposing a 3-step increase in water rates, fees, and charges.
I think due to the length of it and the in-depthness of the materials, I think reading it by title would be sufficient. I think it would be okay to read it by title. I would say what you just did.
I just did. Okay. Okay. We'll cut right past that. And make it easy. You guys got the short version of that. Do I have a motion to accept the ordinance as submitted on first reading? Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. Open for discussion. Mr. Sassen?
I take it that this is the work that needs to be done that people have complained about from an infrastructure standpoint going back to 2016?
Absolutely. If, Craig, do you guys want to do a little short ditty on?
Yeah, I might take care of it.
Before you do that, the reason I bring it up is, you know, and it would be good that Jim's not here today because he's the only one in the prior administration to understand, you know, why it didn't get addressed over a phase during those years, as well as a part of kicking the can down the road.
So this supports the 5-year plan that was put into motion under the last administration. There had to be a very extensive rate study done since then. Now, to answer why there hasn't been a rate increase since it was done 12 years ago, I can only guess. However, I know that the increase in this manner came forward because the Vienna Utility Board, had the 5-year plan in place. We want to get these projects done. It is critical that we upgrade our water and sewer throughout the city, so we can continue to provide those services to our residents and businesses. Without these improvements, I cannot speak to the integrity of our water and sewer system into the next decade.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, because going through, it's like even when you buy a new house, you have to still put money aside because eventually you're going to need a roof, you're going to need other repairs,
Yeah.
the water line's going to break or whatever. So
Short of just simply saying they just didn't do it.
that's what I thought. But to all fairness, I mean, Russ maybe knows.
Yeah.
There was, I can tell you that the rate increase 12 years ago was not particularly well received. There was a lot of folks that were upset with it. And there hadn't been a rate increase before that for 15 or 20 years. I think it's just most folks just don't like to have their water rates increased. There's always been a discussion of doing these in phases. That has had some support, but I think it was just a matter of we have issues that we have to address. They bit the bullet at the time 12 years ago to take care of the problems that they needed to take care of then. And then realizing, of course, that something was going to have to be done in the future to address it. And that's where I think you guys are at now.
Yeah, been here 28 years. We've been working on water and sewer systems extensively for 28 years. It's not that we didn't do anything. We did projects in 28 years. We did tank rehab. We spent millions of dollars on tank rehab to extend our capacity, generator sets, water line replacements. You all remember, 45th place, that particular development. We also did the River Road from the GAC filters down and tie back in 28th Street and up to 20, actually all clear down to Hall's Chocolate to extend that line.
I don't believe Mr. Sasson meaning we haven't done any improvement projects. I think it's questions in relation to
we had that reserve as we raised 12 years ago. We have used that reserve to go on. So we've been trying to update the 5-year plan, and this is with the new updated plan. This is what covers the expenses for the future projects. Okay. And Mike will explain that.
Would you like to run through everything that'll
Yeah.
give us the rundown?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the mayor kind of stole my thunder a little bit there about the 5-year plan. You know, we update this just about quarterly. I know it's hard to see on here, but you know, we're right now in 2026. The map goes out to 2031. So we have the bars all filled out and filled in. So you know, it is a plan, and we're working through it. Really tonight, and looking at the rates. We're having a lot of phase projects that are coming in on wastewater, water. We're calling it the 28th Street storm drainage improvements and pond run dredging. So when you're looking at that, that's a total cost of just over $18 million. And just as a reminder, you have the two enterprise funds, the sewer fund and the water fund, and that's the reason you know, we're talking about those tonight. We went through the budget, which really defined the general funds items. So looking at these projects, they have to be paid somehow. They're being paid through the user rates. Starting with the wastewater projects, the existing line from 17th Street all the way on 11th Avenue to 12th Street. And then starting at that intersection and going to the pump station is undersized. So we are replacing that line, and we'll be going underneath Grand Central. So it's a pretty major project.
Quick question.
Yeah.
When we were looked at the paving last year, we said that road between Lowe's and Sam's, we weren't gonna touch initially because of the traffic that was going up and down. And then we would eventually do that because of the heavy equipment and so on. Has that been decided when that paving would do to make sure it doesn't interfere with this and that it's done last? And then the topic was, since that's gonna be such a heavily traveled road, will it be blacktop or will it be cement?
Are you referring from the bridge to Pond Run up to?
Yes.
Yeah, that really doesn't affect this water line or sewer line replacement because it comes to the bridge and heads to the west down to the river. But that particular project, we might want to wait until they get the road completed up to the school because, like I said,
It's gonna be like you want to double work. I would do that as one of the last things.
Yes.
And the second major part of the project, the line that is going from Vienna to Parkersburg is undersized. It's a pretty major project as we'll be going, of course, through back behind Walmart and mall property, crossing under Pond Run, and then having to go through the Parkersburg flood wall before ultimately getting over to the Parkersburg Utility Board's wastewater plant.
What's the average depth of the sewer line right there?
That's a force main. Which one? The force main or the gravity line?
The last
Street.
one you showed.
Huh?
The last part, that section that you
Force main.
showed.
Oh, it could be 4 to 5 feet.
Yeah, it's
It's a force main. You don't have to follow the terrain. It just kind of goes. Now, 12th Street, it's what, 18, 19 feet?
it's deep, especially before you go diving under, because it's a pretty difficult project because not only are we going under Grand Central, then you got the railroad to fold with too. So you're going, it'll be 2 bores, one across and then another one lower down to be able to get across the railroad tracks.
Now, when you're gonna be boring across the roads, if it's anything like Route 2, there's a lot of sandbed. So when you're digging or trying to put something, you'll have the collapse. You gotta watch for that too. I mean, when I remember, like where I worked, they did that when they were putting in a line. They went under the road, and it ended up collapsing because of the sand that was there. So I don't know. I figured Grand Central's going to be close like the sand.
That should happen on Grand Central because when you we call it board jacket, you'll actually have a case under that road. So when you do, and you actually push in a larger casing, the pipe sits inside of it. So there'll be no disturbance in the ground.
The design is most of the way complete. We're finishing up the final touches before it is actually sent out to bid. We're looking at beginning construction, hopefully sometime in the 4th quarter of 2026. It's going to take about a year to complete. So therefore, looking at the schedule, you'll be looking at your first payment for the project in second quarter of 2028. The funding for the project, you did get a $1 million US CPA grant, and you have been approved for, but we haven't received yet, $250,000 West Virginia Governor's Matching Fund grants, and with the remainder of the funding being through a loan through the DEP, the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund, which was 3% over 20 years.
On your table, you had Pond Run. Is that for dredging?
Yes, sir.
When we had a meeting here, Chad, you said that there was going to be funding for, or a grant or whatever for that?
So we have funding in, Amy could speak to the exact amount, we have a amount of funding in the wastewater fund. That's correct?
Yes.
That we have, that we're going to also apply towards that, which has lowered the cost that we have to then go outside and seek from outside funds. We've tried to keep this as to reduce the amount that we have to increase rates. We've tried to manage the funds and money that we have the very best that we can so that we can keep these at an acceptable rate, so that it's not the full bear of the residents and businesses, but through good management, we're able to do that.
So with the dredging, that should eliminate a good chunk of the flooding problems that are out there?
I would imagine so.
It takes it back to the original design, the dredging. Right now, there's 5 to 6 foot of silt and fill in that pond run.
Has that ever been
takes it back to
dredged?
original.
Not that I,
Yeah,
not since
back
I
in the 90s or late 90s, it was dredged.
Not since
Jimmy
I
Wagner.
moved here in November '96. It's not been from that period forward.
I think the grant you're referring to is the one we were talking about on 28th Street, 15th Avenue. We're looking at getting a grant for that particular stormwater project and retention system from 13th Avenue over to 34th Street.
Okay, switching over to the water project, this is one we've done all the field work and we are starting on the design. There's really three major items that we're trying to address. The small diameter water main replacements, those are mainly, well, probably all galvanized lines that have a tendency to break fairly easily. I don't know how many a year you fix. Just
quite a few. There's an 1.25 inch galvanized line, and they feed, most of the lines feed 20, 30 houses on 1 inch lines. So, I mean, you look at, say, your house in Greenmont, that's probably got 1 inch service line just to that house. So, the old galvanized lines are deteriorated. We can try to fix it, try to get fittings for it, so we're just going to replace them all.
You said you were
2
replacing
inch.
I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you. You said you were replacing with plastic. Is that
Plastic?
Yeah.
We're replacing them with plastic. Yeah.
Second part of the project is some water main reinforcements, and these are just areas where we talk about having dead end lines to help with not only pressure but also water quality. We're looking at 5 different locations where we're going to tie those in to help, like I said, water quality and pressure within those areas.
That'll help with the fire flow and fire protection too. Right now you got dead end line, you don't have very good flow too. You loop that line in, you got constant flow from both sides.
And probably the largest, I guess, the largest portion of the project will actually be a water line replacement going up 16th Street from Grand Central up to 13th Avenue, continuing on 13th Avenue back to Grand Central. So have a triangle shape there. Again, that's another location where Greg has had several line breaks. We also are going to upsize it from its existing 6 to a proposed 8. Again, that's to help with flows and.
Yeah, what this actually does also, it actually ties the well fields in together now. Right now, they're tied together, but they're with small diameter lines, 4 inch, 2 inch lines. So I can be able to push water from well field 910, which is on 10th Street, up to upper in town, or I can do it reverse and flow it back down. Right now there's a jam in there. I can't get the proper flow. If I lose a well field 910, it's hard to get that water down, pushed down through off of 7, 8, or 11 through 14. So that was part of that project I mentioned before, is reference running from well 7-8 down River Road over to Halt's Chocolate. That ties that all together. Finishes that project up.
And looking at the cost for this, it's a construction of about $8.5 million. I guess the one thing we didn't address, there will be some hydrants and valves installed as part of the project too. You know, Craig's crews have been doing that as they go, but to try to finish that up. That project, like I said, we're in design now, looking to get the project out to bid at the beginning of 2027. Again, it's probably another year construction. This is all coming from a loan from the Infrastructure and Jobs Development Council of 3% for 20 years. The dredging of Pond Run, again, you know, as the mayor had said, you know, we're trying to keep these projects small enough that you can pay for them over time. So each of them, you know, we kind of had the big project and pared it down to be able to afford it. The first phase that we decided on this project would really be the mall property, going from the confluence of Little Pond Run and Pond Run up to Grand Central. And then the second phase, you know, when we get the money for it, would start at the crossing, go all the way to 28th Street.
Pretty much that first phase, right?
Yeah, yes, that's the part. Yeah, the second part of project that we're doing now is the dredging of the dry ponds, which the two in Greenmont and one in Glenbrook, we'll be able to take care of those also.
I've never seen water standing in those.
Really?
Yeah. Not the one in Greenmont, up from the house that's just got a foundation. You got that big. That's always been dry down there.
Walk through it, you'll find it.
Hey, Henry, it's because it's all in the foundation of the house.
I figure that's the back before it goes in.
That lower pond's got good 7 foot of fill
I know the lower one
on it.
does.
Yeah, and the middle ones,
I'm talking-
they're maxing out. It's got a lot of sediment. So
If you got a lot of fill, you can just take that dirt and fill in that house foundation.
Yeah.
level over, and there you go. Problem solved.
And then looking at the dredging, a little over $1 million for that project as the first phase. We're just waiting for the weather to dry up a little bit, so we're hoping to open bids somewhere around July to give contractors the time while it's dry to be able to finish up the construction portion of it. And I just kind of wanted to show some of the photos there. You know, you look at the one is actually from, gosh, what is it now? What's Big Lots? Anyway, that's the entrance there. You can see how much, you know, the old channel used to be centered there. Now you've got all that fill that's filled in. Same way on up. So, you know, it's a lot. You don't realize it when you're looking at it, but when you kind of see the aerial of it, how much material is there, it's kind of amazing.
The dirt from the dredging, you guys gonna put over by the park someplace on the heat?
What?
For other purposes later?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Still, that gets all dug up, you're gonna,
What
Put it
are
on
you
pile
gonna use
somewhere.
that for?
What we're gonna do with it?
you can always use it later for something, that's what I'm saying.
We'll see there's some testing that has to be done to that first.
Okay.
So see what contaminants are in it, if there is any. There's
There's a
not,
lot
then
of
yeah,
stuff
we can
that's
use
in there
it.
that's not dirt related. There's just a lot of debris and such in there as well that's not dirt related. That's, you know, flowed off of, you know, just junk stuff, branches and rock and everything else.
Yeah.
And then the final project that we'll be starting probably, that will be spring or summer break next year, 2027. But is the 28th Street storm drainage improvements, the first phase of it. As Greg had mentioned earlier, we're going to start at Pond Run, close to the middle school and going up. That's 15th Avenue. Up to 30th Street. So that'll be the first phase. It's designed already, and we're working on the funding for it. We are trying to get a grant for it. It's a $500,000 grant through West Virginia DEP. It is How we're getting that is it's considered a green process. So, Greg, you wanted to talk a little bit about
Yeah, what that
the
does
plan?
is we're putting the capacity in there. So what right now it overflows going down the street. So we're going to bump the size of the pipe up so it'll hold that water longer before it dissipates in the pond run. So it keeps that flooding issue down also. And then when we do that, it allows us to supply from the ground. So what happens is we're going to take a 48-inch pipe, and when we discharge, it's going to be, say, 24-inch pipes. So it's going to hold that water back, and we're going to let it out at a certain rate. It's not going to just dump it all in pond run and cause flooding down below. Green infrastructure.
And all that being said, to talk a little bit about the rates, and I know that's what you guys are voting on tonight, but to show you the step by step, a constant was $4.50 on the water side over 3 different years. Then on the sewer side, varies a little bit from 406. So again, it's a 3-year program to raise rates. At the end of the day, comparing what your rates will be at the end of the 3 years, you're still right there with the other communities here in the county. And those will also be doing increases too. So I think as it goes further on, it'll look better and better.
We'll still be the lowest around. But I still want to, after the second year when we do this, I still want to come back to you all and say, hey, let's look at this 4th and 5th year and see about the percentage increase. Because we're going to continue with projects from here on out. So, Henry, that'll address your question you had earlier. Just keep bumping rates up.
The other thing is, I don't know if they're called culverts or whatever, where you're going to be able to, like big tanks, not tanks, or like a pocket to help the swell to relieve. Is that any of that going to be considered in any of this stuff? Where instead of having a lot of runoff all at once?
Yeah, that's what we're doing. Well, I just said that we're doing 15th Avenue. Yeah,
Exactly like that. But some of the other places where the runoff is really bad, where you can put something in to contain.
Yeah, we did that on
water before.
We did it on 41st Street between 9th and 10th Avenue. It flooded there forever. Flooded the garage out, flooded a couple houses out. We went and put storage tanks in the ground and let it perk down through the existing soil, and it hasn't flooded there since. So, yeah, we're going to look about doing it at 41st Street and 7th Avenue where the school is, and possibly if we do acquire that complex, putting the stormwater retention system over in that vacant field across the street along parallel 7th Avenue, and that should eliminate that stormwater pump that's there. That's 50 horsepower pump. That's an 8-inch discharge right in Pond Run. So if we could eliminate that, that also reduces the flow to the Pond Run.
On Pond Run, do people realize that if it wasn't for Vernon McDonough putting that dam up at his property, that it would be flooding all the time?
Yeah.
What year did he do that?
That was in the 80s, 82, 83.
Yeah, because I remember when I was on 15th Street in 80 to 88, and that Pond Run would flood down below us, and kids would be riding rafts down it.
Yeah, they sure do.
We have to thank Bernie because he saved that whole trailer park down there on 34th Street. Mm-hmm. It would be flooding if it wasn't for Bernie.
You're talking about Lake Betsy?
No, it's it's up in the field. A lot of people don't know it's there. You have to look at the air view. It's restricted access to it. You just can't drive back.
It's a huge
it's
an earthen dam structure. And when I say huge, I mean at the top it's wide enough you could run 2 cars side by side down it. It's and when it catches all the water that comes from like the North Hills area and so forth, there is a tremendous amount, lake size capacity that is held back there and discharges over a period of time through a large drain that is a very top of Pond Run. But it's an incredible amount of water that holds back. So we're very grateful for the McDonoughs for, or that area near the McDonough Park. Wildlife Refuge. I stand corrected, Jack. Yeah.
It's like the dams at Greenmont. What it does is when it's dry most of the time, it rains, it floods everything to that point back clear to North Hills. And then 5 or 6 days, it dissipates down, lets out a slower rate.
It would be beneficial if you've not seen that, coordinate with Craig.
Yeah, I can take you out.
And you have to get, obviously, permission because it's on private property, to go out, but Craig can take you out and show you that. It's impressive. That it?
Yep, that was it. Yeah. Any further questions?
I do want to say I'm very grateful for the support on the Vienna Utility Board and their complete agreements. When the request was made to break up the increases over a 3-year period, I believe that will truly be beneficial to our residents and businesses. Craig, thank you for backing that, and all the members of the Vienna Utility Board that tried to make it as simplistic as we could in that fashion, but very grateful for their agreements and support on that.
If you have any questions afterwards, you can get hold of me in the office or whatever. Most of you got my cell number, so.
Thank you.
I'll say,
Go ahead.
this is something that has obviously been, it was a big topic. A lot of people have had concerns and stresses about our infrastructure, and I'm very appreciative of the work that y'all have been. I know that we're just now seeing it, but this has been an ongoing project for how long now? You've been working on this behind the scenes, so appreciate all the work that you guys have put into it, and I'm excited, and I think a lot of the residents of Vienna are excited to finally see some upgrades to our infrastructure, so appreciate all the work.
Are there any questions or any other questions or discussions on the first reading of this ordinance? If not, having a motion and a second, and there's no further discussion, all those in favor of passing the ordinance on first reading signify by raising your right hand. What?
We have to do it by.
Oh, because he's on the phone. Sorry. Forgot about you, Rod.
That's okay.
Teresa, if you would you poll the council? I forgot about, he was so quiet on there, I forgot that he was there. Attentive.
You told me I had to mute my phone.
Well, that's because we heard you coughing and eating Snickers or whatever you had going on. Anyway, back to business. Teresa, if you would.
Councilman Diesel.
Yes.
Councilman Morrison.
Yes.
Mayor Emery.
Yes.
Councilwoman Rhodes. Yes. Councilman Sassen.
Yes.
Recorder Smith.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. The second item on the agenda is the ordinance first reading, proposing the construction of sewer improvement projects for the city's sewer system and proposing a 3-step increase in sewer rates, fees, and charges. Do I have a motion to accept the ordinance? I have a motion and a second. Open for discussion.
This all ties with what we just talked about.
Yeah, so their whole presentation dealt with both, but because they're two separate matters, we have to pass two separate ordinances. So is there any new discussion on the sewer side of the house? None? Having a motion and a second and no other discussion. All those in favor, and Ms. Teresa will poll the. You beat me to it. You beat me to it. We'll poll the council.
Councilman Vincent.
Yes.
Councilman Morrison.
Yes.
Mayor Emery.
Yes.
Councilwoman Rhodes. Yes. Councilman Sassen.
Yes.
Recorder Smith.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Moving on. The next item on our agenda is a bid recommendation for a police interceptor utility all-wheel drive vehicle. Mr. Sassen.
This is on page 22 of the 50-page book that Rodney sent out to everybody. Sealed bids for the purchase of a 2026 NA Pursuit Rated Police Interceptor Utility AWD vehicle was opened on April 2nd, 2026 at 10 a.m. with the following results. Stevens Autos for a Dodge Durango at $44,620. Charlie's Dodge for a Dodge Durango for $43,993. After careful review of the bid proposals, the recommendation for council approval from the Budget and Finance Committee for 2026 police utility vehicle is for Charlie's Dodge in the amount of $43,993. Funding for the project is budgeted in account 01-455-59. Do I have a motion?
I'll do that. Please and thank you. But, having heard the bid recommendation, do I have a motion to accept? Do I have a second?
Second.
Having a motion and a second, open for discussion. Mr. Sassen.
This is to replace the cruiser that, I think 10 years old, that's got electrical problems that the dealership can't find or fix, and it would be more expensive to try to fix it and do that than get a new vehicle, so that's the whole intent of this. So if this vehicle was on the street, you probably had a pretty good chance of getting away. If you were doing something, because it would shut down the electrical system.
We are not going to tell anybody what vehicle it was.
So that's the whole intent of this.
We obviously take law enforcement very seriously in the city of Vienna, and I know that each of our council members is fully behind all of the men and women that make up our police department, both in uniform and civilian, in providing them the very best equipment that we can so that they can enforce our local and state laws that must be done. We owe it to them to provide this, and I am very grateful that we're going to move forward and do that this evening. Go ahead.
Did this come outside of what we budgeted for, or was this one of the cruisers that was budgeted?
So there's a rotation. There's supposed to be a yearly rotation of all the cruisers. What happened was somewhere along the way we got out of rotation with COVID and various things, and they never got back into the full swing. So it should be a 2-3, 2-3 kind of a motion, and we got out of that. This vehicle would be very close to coming into that rotation anyway. By adding this and doing this now, that gives us this year, not next year's budget, this year will give us 3 vehicles. We had 2 budgeted, we got those 2. This will be the 3rd. We will get it hopefully in service by fall, by the time you order it and it gets outfitted and all of those various things, maybe midsummer if we're lucky. Will put us where we need to be in our rotation so that our fleet can be ready and well maintained.
So I guess the money was there though. We're not going to have to do a budget revision to.
So we already did all of the finance pieces. We're using the funds that came out of the auction.
Okay.
We did that. Was it last council meeting that we did that? So
cool.
It's not any extra. It was those funds that were generated from the sale of old equipment that we had. Yeah. Any other discussion? Having a motion and a second, no further discussion. As Ms. Teresa will poll the council, all those will answer with what? Yes.
Councilman Deesler. Councilman Deesler.
Yes.
Councilman Morrison.
Yes.
Mayor Emmer.
Yes.
Councilwoman Rhodes.
Yes.
Councilman Sassen.
Yes.
Recorder Smith.
Yes.
That's it. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for that, and I know the officer who will go unnamed, whose vehicle we were replacing, will be very ecstatic about that. The next item on the agenda is, this is a discussion. We're not making any decisions. This evening on this, it is discussion only. The discussion revolves around the permitting of alcohol sales and consumption for businesses along Grand Central Avenue between 20th Street and 34th Street and on city-owned property. So this is being brought. This is a topic that's been a topic for quite some time, and I'll let Ms. Rhodes speak to what went on during the planning commission when this came up. But the main point of the discussion is extending where entities inside the business district can be extended and have for sale by glass consumption of alcohol. This would be like your restaurant, it's not the intent is not a bar or something along those lines, but the intent in the ordinance would be to allow a restaurant per se that would open on a location in this area to be able to do that. It would also be able to extend to city-owned property, such as Spencer's Landing or similar, where large events that would be permitted, and I say permitted, they would have a permit to be able to do it. This would not authorize the family picnic or gathering just to take alcohol to one of our locations. There would be policy, procedure, and a permit process that entities would have to go through and show that they have licensing to be able to do that, and the whole gambit of requirements that would go along with that to ensure that any activity was done in a safe manner, protecting those or any of those that would be in attendance of that. So with that, Ms. Rhodes, I'll throw this to you, and you can give some more background on it and some information. And I'm going to throw up, well, not throw up, I'm going to throw up on the screen an example of the map that Ms. Rhodes sent out. Then we have just kind of an overview of the, yeah, that's it, of the area so that we can kind of see what's being talked about.
I will point out he has a trash.
I am perfectly fine.
Well, the planning commission met at the end of January for their first meeting. At that time, city attorney Scottsted had developed an alcohol ordinance. The planning commission discussed that, and what the planning commission, after some significant discussion, decided was that they were recommending that the ordinance be changed as was originally written to eliminate the previous ordinance that restricted alcohol sales north of 20th Street and to allow it to be in the whole commercial district that exists now, as well as on Spencer's Landing. So that is the recommendation of the planning commission. That is what I feel as president of the planning commission, as well as a resident of Vienna, that this is the best option. I do not believe that I was trying to pull this up here because I couldn't remember which was 1, 2, and 3. So the third amendment possibility was to prohibit possession or consumption of alcoholic beverages in public places and on city-owned or managed property, while allowing exceptions for city authorized or managed events. It goes on a little bit, but my concern with this, Spencer's Landing is going to be developed, and hopefully at some point the production side. This is the city's chance to harness some economic development and to see some economic growth with activities and things that can be down there depending on what we do on the production side. I feel like limiting this to only city-sponsored events takes away everything that could possibly be. If a private entity wanted to do a concert, if someone wanted to do a play in the summertime, if someone wanted to do the weekly music series like it's done at City Park, that all is taken away, any income or any benefit from doing any of those things, which would help the city. The second one, that was actually the first one.
The first
It's
is the
actually the
last.
first
and
one.
the
I'm
second.
writing that. The second one is actually the second one I was going to talk about is actually the first one. And that modifies the existing restriction on alcohol sales within District 2. And it creates an exception permitting alcohol sales for on-premises consumption at properties directly abutting Grand Central Avenue within that corridor. An optional provision included in addressing minimum distance requirement between alcohol establishments and schools or churches. Again, the Planning Commission looked at this. This was not discussed specifically as only along Grand Central because the Planning Commission wanted it to be in the commercial district. But in that ordinance that the Planning Commission looked at, and the recommendation was to follow the state regulations for distances from schools and churches and so forth. And that would keep us from having any kind of confusion or any kind of inconsistency with state law. And it would take away any kind of possibility, I think, what you were talking about, maybe that, it could be confusing. So that's my thought on this. I've got the whole map here, but this is just the blow up of the section from around 20th Street up to 34th. And if you see this, can I go up there?
No,
Okay.
I'm just teasing you. Yes, you can.
Because I can't see it from
Oh, I
here.
got a laser pointer. Right up there. That's why I put it up.
Yeah. I can't see it, so.
That's funny. Yeah, that's why I printed it off and brought it in. I thought it'd be easier to address.
The big concern seems to be where the commercial district eases back into the east side of Grand Central away from the river. So here is 34th, this is Grand Central, and this is the boundary of the commercial district, the blue. So right here, this is just past 6th Avenue, and there's already businesses here. That's Elky's Diner, that's the vacant storefront, that's for Tangles, and there's another shop behind it is now. So that basically takes up that whole area. There's no 7th Avenue down through there until you get to right here where the city building is. Along these other sections, there's also businesses that extend back fairly far off of Grand Central. We have the Dollar General, Jim Leach's office that he just finished. Legacy Real Estate is there, back off of Grand Central. And then we have the buildings that the mayor owns, there past Eagle Park. And then we're already down to 28th Street. So, the rest of that, basically on both sides, is already all commercial and all business. I don't see why we can't keep it as just the whole commercial district. There's a lot of ordinances already in place, like parking and floor space and this and that, that's going to limit what can go in anyway. You're not going to be able to open up a bar or a restaurant in one of these small residences along Grand Central without adequate parking and so forth. Even with a landlord, that could be, depending on whose landlord it is, could be kind of complicated. But I would just like to encourage, because this really isn't too far. When you look at this, so here's 28th, here's 8th Avenue back here. So right here, this is 8th Avenue. This is 6th Avenue. So this is only one block between Grand Central and here. When you go down through here, this is where it turns off. But, this area with the development of Spencer's Landing and putting some activities and festivals and fairs and things in there, this is going to lend itself to economic development. If we pass this ordinance, businesses are going to be looking to develop, possibly restaurants where new school is. There's all kinds of open space down through there. These businesses on the west side of Grand Central
This is Spencer's Landing here. This is a pollinator garden here. This is not commercial, and this is 32nd Street back to 3rd Avenue. So this is all residential. And then there's a lot of businesses, mainly, that take up this space up to 34th Street. There's some residences, 3rd, 4th, here, and where, I think here, someplace. Anyway, I don't know. Everyone has an opinion. I think that the decision needs to be based on what is the best for the city, what's going to bring the city into this century by allowing restaurants to be able to open a business and remain viable and profitable. That's my concern. So thank you.
Let me, if I may.
Go ahead.
So here's what the state of the law is with respect to the city of Vienna, and I'll try to be brief. The city of Vienna allows for alcohol sales in District 2 areas. That's our commercial zone. That was the old way we referred to commercial zone as District 2. We also refer to it under some of our new zoning as C1. So we have basically two names for the commercial areas. The restriction with respect to alcohol sales is in 132911. So in a commercial zone, which this is part of, between the southerly side of 20th Street and extending north to the northerly side of 34th Street, including the property commonly known as 3400 Grand Central Avenue, in that specific area of our commercial zone, there is a ban on alcohol sales by the trade. So the question, and I drafted a couple of different versions of this because I didn't have the benefit of the conversation we're having tonight. So the Planning Commission voted to repeal that general prohibition to allow that area between 20th and 34th Street to have the same, restrictions that the other commercial zones have. The other part of the commercial zones have, which is there is no restriction. And then there are other things that you have to consider, but most of those are going to be governed by the state. Alcohol sales are divided by your licenses, and they are divided essentially into 3 categories. And mercifully, we live in the state of West Virginia, so none of the 3 categories are specifically governed the same way. And they all have different definitions as to what, or distances as to where alcohol could be sold based on the type of alcohol that it is. So if it's, and I wrote that in the memo, let me pull this memo up so I say it correctly. So if you're selling liquor, you cannot be in the immediate vicinity of a school or church. It doesn't say what immediate vicinity means, it just says literally immediate vicinity. If you're selling beer, you're a brewer, distributor, retailer of Class A non-intoxicating beer, which again, the statute refers to beer under a certain percentage as non-intoxicating. Never had any of that. But that
It's not a time for confession, my friend.
that can't be sold within 200 feet of a church or school. And then they make a distinction for wine and hard cider, which is the last category. And again, there's no standalone metric, no X number of feet or church or feet from churches or schools. And they're basically state-run stores are basically subject to the same immediate vicinity. So it's clear as mud how this works. So the city of Vienna generally allows alcohol, as I said, sold in the commercial district, except for 20th and 34th Street. We have general prohibitions on possession and consumption of alcohol in our city parks, which leaves us to 2 parcels of property. The property that's at 12th Street, there's some future idea that it's going to be used for some type of recreational activity, and of course Spencer's Landing, which is already being used as for recreational activity. The 2 benefits of those parcels is they're not under park rules, which means they don't have the same restrictions for the alcohol possession and consumption have for the rest of the parks. The downside is Spencer's Landing in particular falls in that 20 to 34th Street restriction. There's nothing that allows alcohol to be there, and so you're having events and things that are happening at the park that you may want to have alcohol consumed in very limited or regulated or however you want ways. And you're also by continuing to have the blanket prohibition between 20th and 34th Street, you're preventing the potential development of those buildings, because of those buildings, I've seen very few restrictions that encourage development. But that said, that's kind of what the state of everything is. So you can sell alcohol in the commercial district, just not between 20th and 34th Street. You can have alcohol, you can't have alcohol in the parks, and you could make provisions to allow alcohol to be sold and used and just consumed or whatever on 12th Street and at Spencer's Landing. And so the other thing is there's some language in our general alcohol ordinance that I'd like to see changed just to clean it up a little bit. But that's what the general state of the law is for the city of Vienna.
So with that, and I've looked at this and have, obviously some opinions in the matter. I'm concerned about just simply doing away with it entirely and relying upon the state. I'm not saying that I'm necessarily against it, but I've got some concern. In this area, we have 4 churches located in this area along the route. 2 Methodist churches, the Baptist Church, and the Church of Christ, I believe, in this general area. So we want to be very aware of what impact this has, and if the state law just says in the immediate vicinity, I would really like to be able to know what that is and to be able to define it. And it depends, right? So with that being said, I do believe if we're going to develop some of these areas and use them, then yes, we have to make it more amenable to that, especially in our Spencer's Landing and city-owned property. I do believe there has to be a process in place that a actual entity would have to apply for a permit, meet certain requirements that is established by the city, and abide by those because it's on city property, and that there will be liabilities with those things. So I believe we have to establish some type of a policy and or ordinance, or through an ordinance, that would govern how exactly alcohol consumption would be regulated on city-owned property so that we can maintain control of that and also look at the issues of liability. That's my 2 cents. Henry?
I'm not an attorney, and I don't play one in council chambers.
But he did say it a Holiday Inn Express.
But when you think about this, you gotta break it apart, because you can't lump it together. I mean, this is what Wood County commissioners do when they try to pass one piece and throw in the library as an example, as a hostage. So if you think about this, you have the zoning and you have Spencer's Landing, 2 separate parts.
Absolutely.
They need to be viewed as 2 separate parts. Number 1 is what's in blue, that's a business. A business has to get a liquor license. A business sells liquor, they are responsible if something happens to the individual that they sell the liquor to, that they're incapacitated in the process. Going through and allowing for liquor sales at Spencer's Landing, there's a huge liability. I don't think that's a liability the city wants to take on unless there's a locked away type, way of not being held liable for something. Because let's think about this. We live in a society that is suit happy. You can't get kids to go to school because there's a snowflake that comes in the air. When Harry was younger, I should say, going to school, or say with myself, you could have a foot of snow on the ground, you were going to school. Today, people are afraid to do certain things because they're going to get sued. In this case, with Spencer's Landing, I understand the thing about, concerts and stuff like that, but who's going to take the liability for something like that? I know that we as a city don't have deep pockets.
So that's why there would have to be very specific policy. Parkersburg does the taste of, what do they call it? Taste of, however it is, right? So we have a Parkersburg City Councilman with us. He could probably update us on that. They do the taste of Parkersburg with that. I know that Belpre during their homecoming does a beer garden at their location. They take their tennis court areas and section off, and there's very strong restrictions on that. So I believe there's various examples in which that communities around Vienna are doing this, and that's why I don't believe that we can just let it be something loosely monitored, that if we are going to choose to allow these things to go on at Spencer's Landing, at the riverfront property at 12th Street, in wherever, we need to, and you're right, Henry, we need to address this in two pieces. Even if we lift off and allow the consumption of alcohol in the blue business area, we still as a city need to have an ordinance in place that would govern our city-owned property, that would put those guidelines in place to protect us on a liability. And I just think that would be wise. So I agree with that.
Let's hear from the attorney.
Yeah, what's the attorney have to say?
What's the plaintiff?
On the liability, what you do is you make sure that all of the entities that are going to sell alcohol have a substantial insurance policy to begin with. And you can do language excluding the city from responsibility, that kind of stuff. Nothing's going to ever solve that. The issue is, do we want to make it so that Vienna is like Belpre used to be, where they never had any alcohol sales in the city and they never made any money and they never had anybody want to be there? Or do we want to do like Parkersburg, which has the Parkersburg Homecoming, which I know we sold alcohol at that because I was the third president there was a substantial amount consumed.
That was probably moonshine back then.
that might have been back in the Prohibition.
White
when I was young.
That's it.
I wouldn't worry so much about the liability issue. That's what insurance is for. We want to worry about what we can do responsibly to make this a place that people want to come to. And if you have a total restriction on the sale, you don't have to sell bourbon at the Spencer's Landing, but beer and wine is certainly reasonable.
I mean, I'd probably go if you sold bourbon.
That's true.
Jack, he said he'd become a sponsor. Or a sponsor for you.
And that's what I'm saying, the compromise that we have with protecting commercial district, because if you look at the geography of it, I mean, you have all of your commercial in Vienna, it's all the way down here. And then it slowly, it changes to your residential. And I think the purpose of that was to have some kind of a buffer between the commercial district and all of the different things and the residential areas. And I don't think it's an unreasonable compromise to retain some of that buffering zone that you have by just broadening it to those areas that you already have the structures there that are ripe for development, without negatively impacting or having a less of a negative impact on some of the surrounding residents if you just limited it to the area that's adjacent to Grand Central Avenue. And it kind of, you would hope that you would be able to develop that. And then if you are encouraging development, you see that it is being developed, then you could always come back and revisit and say, hey, everybody seems to like this. Everybody seems to think this was a good idea. Maybe we'll expand that area a little bit and do the entire area. Now, I don't have a dog in the hunt. I'm just looking for somebody to tell me what they want me to draft in the ordinance. My suggestions are to clean up the ordinance that we have, which is to fix one of the definitions. But beyond that, it's how do you guys, what do you envision trying to encourage that area to look like? Do you want to try to encourage businesses to come in that might sell a glass of wine with a bowl of spaghetti and whatever, and maybe get a nice little cafe or an Italian restaurant or something in those buildings that are kind of length out? I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep putting my arm in Tony's face somewhere.
Tony's going to get defensive here in a second.
But what I'm saying is that what you want to do, and maybe look at it in phases. And I agree. I think you could address the Spencer's Landing issue and the 12th Street issue separately. And you could have a separate ordinance that says we'll allow alcohol to be consumed. And the reason I picked the language for that I tried to draft the language for that reason in one of the proposals, and we can, move these around a little bit, but I think I used city-sponsored or authorized events. And my thought was, if you wanted to have, like we have Friends of Vienna, but if you wanted to have something else, and you came to the city and said, hey, I'd like to have a wine and jazz festival at Spencer's Landing, and the city would have a mechanism to say, okay, what is that going to look like? Well, we're going to sell bottles of wine. Well, we really don't want, we don't care that you sell bottles of wine as long as the entire bottle is not consumed on premises. Maybe you could sell a glass or 2 glasses of wine, and then you could sell it once they see they like your sample or tasted your wares, so to speak. Then you could allow for the individual bottles to be sold. However, but what my point is, you could craft a mechanism that would, I think, address some of the folks' concerns that live around here, which is we're going to have less people drinking in our street, which I don't know that we would, but I think that's the general fear. But that's why I said city authorized. The city would have some control over what that would look like. And then as far as the liability, you say if you want to have this program, then you need to have $1 billion insurance policy. You need to have, all of these different things. You need to indemnify, which I don't know that complete indemnity would actually work, but you need to do as much as you can to indemnify or at least name the city as an additional insured so that if something did happen that was as a result of some negligent or reckless act that occurred on that property, the city would have some layer of protection. But Mr. Diesel's correct. You can't completely contract away or obviate all possibilities of liability. If we did, if we even tried, we'd all be driving Nerf cars and wearing Nerf suits and we'd never go outside.
So even if we would repeal the current ordinance and say the current business district is open for business, lights on, have at her, you gotta follow state code. We still have to have, just as Henry brought up and I've discussed, we still have to have an ordinance on the book that regulates what goes on city-owned property.
Well, I think if you're going to have, I think if you're going to open up Spencer's Landing, to that, you either need to put it under the park system and say there's no alcohol sales there, or you need to have a mechanism in place so that you have some direct way to control it. Because right now, it's no different than if I opened a beer up in the parking lot over here. I mean, you might be able to get dinged for a public intox or something like that, but there's no way to give anybody permission to do that. And I think that would certainly help for Spencer's Landing. Yes, you need some mechanism, be it an ordinance. I think an ordinance would be good to allow us to generate a policy to deal with this. And you can deal with that separately from this issue. You can just say, I want an ordinance that says that we can allow alcohol sales by however you imagine in those 2 parcels.
Yeah, hold on just a second. Tony had his hand up first.
Yeah. So, and I'm looking at these, I think it's, in my opinion, best to look at these both completely separately. As far as Spencer's Landing, our 12th Street property, city-owned properties versus our business district and how we regulate the alcohol sales. So I want to talk about them and give my kind of opinion. That's why they hired me, I guess. But, so I guess if I'm looking at this from Grand Central Avenue, in my opinion, I think it's a great idea. Not because I want to see downtown Vienna turn into a club district. I don't want to see wild stuff happening down here. But I do believe, and I'm looking into the future, and I think it's important to have the future in perspective here whenever we're having this discussion, because look what we're talking about. We're talking about developing a piece of land that's a quarter mile from this district. We're talking about bringing people, from other states to come in and enjoy, the beauty that Vienna has to offer. And whenever they get done with the program or whatever they've attended down at Spencer's Landing, and they can walk up, a quarter mile to a nice Main Street kind of, we got the lamp posts, and I can see more development happening there. In the future, they've got a place to go to have a restaurant or go to a nice place to eat. They can, have a beer, have a glass of wine, whatever their, choice is with the dinner. Personally, I don't have any problem with that. I don't think that, and I can't speak for everybody, but I have a feeling, I kind of feel like the majority of the Vienna residents would kind of agree with that, in that. But I also would like to say there's a line. I think we need to add a time frame. I think we need to add a time restriction to the sale of alcoholic beverages specifically on this, with this ordinance. And that would be to prevent, something. I don't want to see, and I think a lot of people would agree with me on this. I don't want to see 2 a.m. the bars closing in downtown Vienna, and you've got people in there, and after liquor sales just ended, last call 2 a.m. You've got the college lifestyle going on. I don't think that that's what we're after here. And maybe I'm on an island here, but I don't believe that's what we're after in this district. But I do think, and I do support, being able to come in. So with that being said, for the downtown district, I would like to see, some kind of time frame, time constraint added into the ordinance, something like a 10 p.m. I think that's reasonable to say no liquor sales or no alcoholic sales after 10 p.m. With this ordinance. And then moving on to Spencer's Landing, we're putting a stage. I think it's important to with this stage, we're anticipating this stage being used, hopefully more than once per year. And I think if you can attract, I've had great conversations with Jack and a couple other people about, Mr. Mathers and a couple other people about, the potential for the stage and what can really go on down here. If you've got a section of Spencer's Landing that you can, if you've got a company that wants to come in and they want to set up for a concert, and you can get temporary fencing set up, and you can have a designated location where, hey, this is a roped off area, it's ticketed. If you want to come in, you're going to have to buy your ticket. You're going to have to do whatever it is. You're going to have to walk through our metal detectors. However, but it's going to be a private event on city property. I think that company or that entity or whoever it is that's putting on that show, that's collecting the fees, they pay a rental fee to the city of Vienna. And the city of Vienna, and I know whenever I had my wedding, for instance, a couple of years ago, we had to have what was called party insurance. And I literally, it's probably changed since then, I don't know.
They drank at your wedding?
No, we didn't serve alcohol at my wedding, believe it or not, but we still had to have party insurance. but they had the option. So, and I'm going to make numbers up. They asked me how many people we were going to have, and we told them a number. And then they said, all right, how big is the venue? And I told them how big the venue was. And they said, all right, it's going to be $300 for the one night party. And they said, are you going to be serving alcohol? And if I would have said, I said no, but if I would have said yes, and like, all right, now it's going to be $450. There was a if you're serving alcohol, there was an extra add-on. But that incorporated, I think it was like a $500,000 liability policy. And there was some other, things that was incorporated with that. But I think if we work something like that into a rental policy where we're going to rent out, the city of Vienna would possibly rent out a section. I don't think we can rent out the entirety of Spencer's Landing. I don't think that's realistic. I think we need to leave the majority of it open to the public. But if we wanted to just rent out, say, the stage area and do something like along those lines, then I say, yeah, let them serve alcohol. Let them take on that liability. Let's do everything that we can to get out from underneath of that liability with, putting the things in place. And I know we've got a couple of attorneys here saying that it's not realistic to get completely absolved of all liability, but I think if we do everything in our power to make it happen. Anyways, that's my opinion.
Thank you. Harry? I just want to make sure everybody was clear that the Spencer's Landing is separate from the business district, and if we allow alcohol sale in the business district, it's not a city liability issue. Correct.
Good point. Well, I got two hands going up. Ms. Rose?
I just wanted to respond to a couple of things that people said. One about the distances from the churches. I think that one ordinance about non-intoxicating beer and everything where it says 200 feet, that's going to include anything that serves alcohol, because I don't know any place that sells wine and liquor, but not beer. You know, so I think there's always, that's the way I interpret it.
No,
So-
I've been to places that serve just beer, they don't serve wine and liquor, but I've been to go the other way.
Yeah, but I haven't seen anything the other way, yeah. So, you know, I think that distance, that state law, you know, about that 200 feet is going to cover that. The other thing, churches have services on Sunday morning. You know, there won't probably be restaurants open and serving alcohol until after church. It's let out in the afternoon. That's what most restaurants do down in front of the mall. And then, you know, maybe like on a Wednesday night or something, they may have service. But, you know, I don't think we're going to have that much confusion or whatever, what's the word I'm saying? Conflict between churches and schools, and there's not a school after meal shuts down anyway. The Spencer's Landing liability, you know, I completely agree. There, you know, I believe there has to be a contract. You know, there has to be stipulations. And I think that when that contract's being developed, we can look at some other cities close by and see what they do as far as, you know, limiting or allowing or whatever, and find out how well that's worked for them. You were talking about like buy the glass or buy the bottle or something, or, you know, how much people can drink. I don't think we should police. It's not our business to say, okay, you can only drink 2 glasses or you can only drink a glass, and who's going to enforce that?
The city when I've been, and this has been 30 years ago, when I was at the Morgantown Wine and Jazz Festival, they used to have it, you could have, you know, it was whomever was putting it on, they'd say, well, you got your 2 cards or your 2 tickets or whatever. You can use one here or use one.
He's talking about specific fairs and festivals. That would be at Spencer's Landing, not at a restaurant.
Okay. And I do think we need, you know, I think all ordinances have a stop time for alcohol sales or consumption, but I think we ought to be very cognizant of how that affects restaurants and businesses, because a lot, you know, there's going to be people still in restaurants at 10 p.m. that want to have a drink. I think we're looking at this as like it's going to be a wild party downtown, and, you know, people are going to be on the street, and they can't be on the street. You know, that's something we may want to look at in the future, because Parkersburg and Marietta both have the outdoor, whatever, one's door and one's whatever Parkersburg is. And everything that I've read on that, all the replies, everything from the city and the city administrators say they don't have any problem with that at all. Now, we're not even getting into that now, but if they don't have problems with their outdoor recreation beverage sections, you know, I don't think we need to be too worried. I mean, there's always going to be people that get in fights. They're going to get drunk. They're going to piss people off, and, you know, they're going to fight, or they're going to walk out and fall down Grand Central Avenue or something, you know. But I don't think that's going to be anywhere near the norm. And then, again, you know, the contracts, I think that's going to be the major thing. I don't think we should limit anything as far as on public property, as far as what can be served, how it can be served, or whatever. I think that can be done individually in a contract, because if, say, some media company wants to put on a big concert and they want to do this certain thing, but we already have it in our ordinance, so we're not going to allow this one little thing that we never thought about, or we were only going to allow these things, that we're going to get messed up. So I think that can be done on a per contract basis with what people want. We don't, just because it doesn't say we don't allow this, or we only allow this, doesn't mean that's how it has to be done. We don't have to do that. We can say, not say anything about what's allowed or not allowed, but in that ordinance where the city has to authorize the events, that's where we can limit if we need to, or whatever, what's going to take place, because we don't want to turn around away business.
We don't want a hotel or a restaurant, not being able to do what they want to do. I think we just have to be cognizant, this is about economic development. This is about economic growth. This is about attracting families. This is about attracting workers and businesses to Vienna, which we have not done. And a lot of that is because we are still living, 50 years ago. So, anyway, that's all I wanted to say. I just, I really believe that allowing this in the whole commercial district, because basically on the east side of Grand Central, that's already businesses, that's not that far back. If there was a 7th Avenue, there would be a little bit further back, but it's not. I mean, you're only partway to 8th Avenue, and that's only halfway from Grand Central Avenue. I don't think we're ever going to have any problem with that. And on the west side of it, there's already so many businesses, and it's ripe for commercial development, little stores, specialty stores, coffee shops, things like that, not bars and restaurants necessarily.
Henry, what you got?
A number. What is the cost for a liquor license these days?
Pretty cheap.
I'd have to go
It's not much. Like
So there's a lot of
$1,000
background.
or something.
It takes time, and there's a lot of background. There's a limited amount that they distribute. You have to basically have a clean record, and it's processed, and it's only at a location. So whenever you get a license, you don't just get to take it and go wherever you
No,
have
it's
an
an
establishment.
address, it's a physical
Yeah.
address,
Yeah.
that's correct. I was just kind of curious, because, there's not much back there, it's businesses, but how many of them are gonna actually, sell liquor?
Right.
That's why I say this is two separate matters.
And I think that's,
You view this
I think
as
that's
one.
how we're seeing everything, that everyone's in agreement, we need to deal with this in two separate actions. And, approach it in that fashion, that we're dealing with city-owned property in general, then the business district. I guess, my only individual hang-up is just, opening the gate altogether, just saying, have at it. I understand the aspects of, what could or could not happen. Whatever decision we make, did Rod have something? Whatever decision we end up making when this comes to council, this is going to affect, generations to come, and we gotta get it right. Or as close to right as we possibly can. Rod, did you have something?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
We can now.
Okay, thank you. There's a lot of things that were said that I liked, and I don't want to be a buzzkill on this whole thing. The ordinance that deals with extending the sales of alcohol up to 34th Street, I don't have really an issue with that. The city's been very fortunate at the southern end of the city where alcohol is permitted. There has not become a quote unquote red light district. As Mr. Scott said earlier, that he didn't want that to happen, and I certainly do not want that to happen with this extension here between 20th and 34th Street. So whatever we have to add to that ordinance to prevent that, whether it's a time frame or whether it's a type of business or whatever, I'm not smart enough to try to make suggestions like it, but I just want to keep Vienna a nice community, a safe community, where we don't have to have a business where they end up having a fight, ends up on Grand Central or something like that. So, in that I agree 100% that these two issues are separate. With the Spencer's Landing and the other city-owned property, how it's written, I think it's very vague, and maybe we've purposely done that. I'm having a hard time accepting it because I do not know what the city may impose as reasonable conditions on such authorization. I don't know what those would be. There's things I'm thinking of that should be non-negotiable. For example, any entity that wants to sell alcohol on city-owned property needs to be a business type. Friends of Vienna, for example, is a 401c3 organization. They must be insured to sell or allow consumption of alcohol. I think it's a non-negotiable where there needs to be a place where it is sealed off and you can only have that alcohol or whatever you want to sell in that certain area, and it can't go outside that area. I think things like that should be added and should be noted on the ordinance, so people who apply understand that process that they have to go through. I'm not really loud about individual parties allowing or having permission to sell or have alcohol on city-owned property. I'm just not there yet on that one. So that's kind of what I'm thinking right now. One other thing, if this does go through and passes, I'd like to know what are the reasonable conditions are before we kind of pass this thing. So, we're not having some kind of a loophole somewhere, or there's some kind of so vague that anybody can do it. So that's my 2 cents worth. I think everyone has hit on those anyway. Maybe I just said it a little bit differently.
So
thank you.
So hearing from what I've heard from all parties in general, I believe we're all kind of headed in the same direction and thought process with this. These are 2 separate matters that we have to address. The allowance of alcohol sales within the extended business district is one. Then the ordinance that would deal with alcohol consumption or the sale of alcohol on public-owned property. And that would be done through ordinance as Rod made mention, that there would be, whether that application process is included as part of that ordinance and lays that out so that council is fully aware and knowledgeable of what those conditions would be before you would vote yes or no on any of that matter. Did you have something else you wanted to say?
No, I just wanted to clarify when Rob was talking, any entity that sells alcohol in Spencer's Landing has to be a business and has to have a liquor license, and no one can have a private, say like a
party or
whatever, and sell alcohol without a liquor license. It would have to be, bring your own bottle, or, the person holding it would bring it, but they couldn't just go down there and sell alcohol just because they wanted to. So, and then, I think all the things that Rod's concerned about, I understand all those, really, but I think that's part of the things that we need to look at putting in contracts and, doing this individually and not making a overall umbrella global policy that may rule out something that we want at some point. We can handle that, but I don't think necessarily it needs to be in an ordinance. That's my opinion.
I believe Rod, and I'd like to wrap this up because we could talk about this all evening. I believe what Rod is referring to is that he wants to know what that policy would look like before he would vote yes on implementing it. Because if you vote yes, then we come back with a policy that just says, "Hey, have fun." That's not what he's looking for. So I'd like to wrap this. 60 seconds.
And I really appreciate everybody's comments, and it's been good conversation. I do agree with that. I think it's important that we look at this as baby steps, because we are kind of coming out of, what we call the dark ages or whatever we said a minute ago, and we're moving into. I think it's important to move in at kind of a snail's pace here, and we said it before, and I want to reiterate, we could always make changes again in the future, so I think it's important to baby step into the future, maybe wait until some things get developed down at Spencer's Landing, maybe some things get developed here along Grand Central Avenue, And then, maybe in a decade or so, this gets revisited and dealt with at that time. But I do think it's kind of important to ease into this. And I think that's kind of what I've been hearing for most of the night too.
One quick comment, I think that it's imperative that, when this is on the agenda for the next time, that we vote on this, especially Spencer's Landing, because the Freedom Festival is coming up and the vote on the O. And if we don't do this now, then there may not be any alcohol sales down there. There was alcohol sales down there last year. It went perfectly fine. There was no problems. But we can't keep putting this off, so.
And to be clear, it wasn't on city property.
That wasn't on city.
Right, it was over on Harper's property, but if we're going to do it, we still have to.
So the challenge is this now falls to you, Mr. Skogstad, to take kind of everything that we've talked about and bundle it up in a nice package, 2 separate packages that we're going to address.
Generally speaking, I was going to draft an ordinance allowing alcohol sales on city-owned or managed property, requirement to be a business that's appropriately licensed. If you'll look at paragraph 2 of the ordinance amending 52106, I set out some criteria in there, but I'll try to draft something.
With that, I'm closing discussion on that agenda item. Moving on to boards and reports and closing council comments. We'll wrap all those up together. Has anybody got anything they want to say or report on?
With the and I know Mr. Sassman mentioned this. We have the North Hills swim team had reached out to VRIA and is working with VRIA to get something. I'm not saying that it's been finalized yet, but we're working with them to get something established there, possibly getting that swim team up and running. So that is, to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, we're working with them there.
We're very well, whatever we can do then.
Like I said, the practice is typically 8 in the morning. They're done by 10. You got a swim meet usually once a week. It bounces between, DuPont here, the Y. Everybody does, whatever. There's a big turnout.
I've got no problem supporting them if need be. What you got?
Planning Commission meeting is the last Thursday or Monday of this month. I think is it the 26th or something like that. Anyway, I think it's before the next or after the next council meeting. So,
Teresa, do you want to talk about the sale, the really big sale?
Huge sale, May 2nd.
It's huge.
It is huge. We are overflowing the storage unit, and we still have more stuff to pick up. It's 8 to 2 or 3 at Wayside United Methodist Gym.
Harry?
I've had some questions from people about the status on our soccer field development.
So I actually have a meeting tomorrow with Mr. Slusher to look at what our viable options are to give the city good usable space that we can do that's obtainable with what we have to work with. So that is actually Tony can attest to that. We've been in discussions over the last few days and have been bouncing around ideas and plan to go down and look at various things and say, okay, what's obtainable? We always have those, the grandiose ideas that we want to get to, but what can we really provide with what VRI has available right at the present time, what we have through your generous donation that we're very thankful for, that we can give the area a decent place to play, and not just make some minor changes and still have, kind of cruddy facilities. So.
Okay. That was why I was asking, because of the Rosemar Field, their area. I didn't know when we'd get the other stuff cleared off there, the little.
That's all part of the discussion that we're going to have tomorrow about what we can do and how we can start to work in that direction and get those things done. But movement is happening slowly but surely. We're getting there.
Just so all you people that have been asking about this, we're getting it done.
We're working it. Before we close, I want to recognize we have Andrew Bukowski with us this evening from Parkersburg. Thank you for being here. If you wanted to come learn how council was supposed to be Man, I hope you took notes this evening on how it was. Feel free to use any of this. I don't own the rights to any of it, but I hope that it's useful for you. He's also a candidate for House of Delegates with that. So we appreciate you coming and visiting with us this evening and being here.
And Andrew is a candidate in our district, so.
In our district. So
I'd also like to point out that Daniel Miller, also running for House of Delegates District 11. Good to meet you.
I'm unaware of it. I'm sorry. I
No,
didn't
you're
know that.
perfectly fine. You're perfectly fine. Right now, it's about Andrew and his contender.
He's running unopposed in the primary,
Yes.
so yeah.
Oh, there you go, right there. That's always a good position. We are nonpartisan here, so we're just one big happy family. So thank you both for being here this evening, and my apologies for overlooking you. I was unaware.
Apologies necessary.
All right. With that said,
Whoa. You have the meeting on May the Levy on Tuesday the 21st at 8 a.m. What number do I call in on? Because I gotta be at the plant.
You can call either my cell or you can call that number.
Okay, so.
You can just call my cell.
Okay.
Rodney, did you have something?
Yes, I'd like to thank Teresa for taking my place tonight, and the Lord willing, I can't wait to see her tomorrow night.
Oh, you know my earlier statement where I said I was going to throw up? All right, with that, this meeting's adjourned.